It so happened that among the revolutionaries in the Russian Empire, true names were often replaced by underground nicknames. Such examples can be cited many, but one is enough. The name Lenin is much better known to many than Vladimir Ulyanov. And this leader of the proletariat was also called Old Man. There were other similar nicknames. Not surprisingly, and Comrade Stalin had different nicknames and were in use not only among party comrades. Close to Joseph Vissarionovich, party members used the nickname Koba, which Stalin himself invented, and the roots of this nickname goes back to the ruler of Persia Kavada I. This monarch was not a special admirer of his people, rather he could be called an Eastern despot. Here Stalin liked him as a prototype for his own party nickname. So Stalin is also a pseudonym. It was the Eastern despot Stalin called Adolf Hitler. He himself, probably, was white and fluffy, but Winston Churchill called the ruler of the Kremlin cunning Byzantine. In those years for Western Europeans, the East was a symbol of dodgy and cunning. So nicknames had a somewhat insulting character. During World War II, the ties between Great Britain and the United States of America became especially close. Large correspondence was conducted, and the leaders of the two powers, Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill, and the American president in letters to the British Prime Minister, often called the Soviet head of state as Uncle Joe. It is not difficult to explain where the nickname came from. The inhabitants of the United States are world-famous fans of shortening words. Well, the word Joseph in English sounds like Joseph. It remains to take the first half of this sound as Joe. That's the tricky part. Well, as long as they corresponded with each other, it wasn't too much trouble. But here came the time of the Yalta, Crimean Conference of the leaders of the three great powers. The first joint meeting of Roosevelt, Churchill and Stalin was held from November 28 to December 1, 1943. However, although a radical turning point in the Second World War had already occurred, the final defeat of the aggressor countries was still far away, and the personal ties between the heads of the Soviet Union and the United States were just being established, so the Turin Conference was no joke. However, by the time the Yalta Conference began, February 4 to 11, 1945, the outcome of World War II could only be doubted by the true fanatics of the Third Reich and the Japanese Empire. To people whose minds were not blinded by fanaticism, the situation was quite clear. The final defeat of Nazi Germany and militaristic Japan was a matter of a few months, at most 6 months. And here the situation was much less tense than in Turin. It was possible to make jokes. Working meetings of the Yalta Conference were held with banquets, and at one of these events, Franklin Roosevelt asked Winston Churchill if he, Roosevelt, could tell Stalin that they call him Uncle Joe. Churchill, for all his faults, was a very sensible politician. Yes, and Joseph Stalin, English leader, knew more than the President of the United States. The descendant of the Duke of Marlborough was well aware that the reaction of the Soviet leader may be unpredictable and damage the planned agreements. However, Franklin Roosevelt believed that Stalin has a good sense of humor and in general with him can agree on any issue. That's why he told Stalin about his nickname, Uncle Joe. Only Roosevelt could not correctly calculate the consequences. Stalin clearly did not approve of the joke and said, "I can leave this table." The hall was enveloped in dead silence. This situation required some kind of discharge, otherwise a real thunderstorm could begin. The lightning rod turned out to be the representative of the American delegation, James Bones. This man was obviously smart, because later he became U.S. Secretary of State. He was able to turn everything into a joke with the words, "You in the USSR used the words Uncle Sam in relation to the U.S. President. Here Americans by analogy and call Stalin so." Joseph Vissarionovich realized that the Americans consider him an equal partner and decided not to further inflame the situation. Gradually, the tension was smoothed out. The conference went on as usual. Later, Comrade Stalin admitted in a circle of associates that no offense to Roosevelt he did not feel, but in response to the joke of the American president, decided to play his own joke. He understood the humor of the American head, but the representatives of the United States and Great Britain were clearly not up to further humorous statements. Well, the Yalta Conference was the last time when there was unity between the Allies. In Potsdam, there was no more Franklin Roosevelt nor common trust, but that was still in the future.